Queen's Gambit, the Netflix series, has been a smash hit worldwide, and it's really ignited an interest in the game of chess. If you haven't already seen it, I would strongly recommend it. There are great performances. I think the lead, Anya Taylor-Joy, playing Beth Harmon, is really well cast. She's kind of otherworldly, but there are strong performances all around. It's beautifully shot, wonderful colours. Fashion's great as well. It's set in the 60s, and I think the clothes that Anya Taylor-Joy, Beth Harmon, wears are really great. And the music's good too. I love 60s music. And what's really intrigued me is that a lot of my non-chess playing friends found the chess really gripping. But for chess players, they've also found the chess great because it seems authentic, and the producers have made sure that the chess games are actually either from real chess games or that they're plausible positions. Well, it's no wonder when you have advisors like Bruce Pandolfini, who is a renowned chess coach in the States, and Garry Kasparov as well. And it's fascinating to see the kind of positions that they've picked. And I want to have a look at some of the games that are featured. I'll try not to give too much of the plot away if you haven't already seen it. But, well, apologies if you feel I do. So I want to start with this. Let me get to the position. So this is very early on in the series, and Beth Harmon, the lead protagonist, plays a blindfold game against a certain Mr. Grantz. So this is actually taken from a game between Richard Reti and Savieli Tartakower. Now, this is a famous game, a famous miniature. If you haven't already seen it, I'd be really surprised. So let's just zip through this very quickly. I mean, here Tartakower makes this move, e5, which is not the best. And here he was obviously shocked by this move, castles queenside. It's a beautiful move. Of course, if queen takes knight, then rook e1 wins the queen. Knight takes knight was played, and he had overlooked queen d8 check from Reti. This was taken, double discovered check. If the king comes back to e8, then rook d8 is mate. And otherwise, king c7, bishop d8 is a really picturesque checkmate. Now, this introduces one of the main themes in the actual chess games, and that is a queen sacrifice. Now, I don't think this is accidental. Somehow, you know, when you have a woman who's the lead in the series, it sort of fits that you have queen sacrifices. I'm sure it was intentional, and we're going to see that in you know, a fair few games. So, for example, this next one. So this was in the Kentucky State Championship. I can't remember the name of Beth Harmon's opponent here, but Harmon had white. Bit of a messy position, but somehow one imagines that Black's king is in huge trouble here with his bishop coming to e5, and the game ended like this, just very quickly. Bishop g4, and there we go, another queen sacrifice. Bishop e5 check, those bishops slicing through to the king. Queen f6, and Black can only just sort of stick pieces in the way, and that is checkmate. There we go. And actually, in the same tournament, there was a very intriguing finish. So this was Beth Harmon playing Black against Towns, or I think it was DL Towns, but he's just known as Towns in the film. And here, well, it was kind of funny. In this position, you can see that it's rook and 3 pawns against rook, knight and 1, and we can see how powerful a knight is in the middle of the board. Here Towns plays rook takes pawn on h6, and Beth Harmon moves the king up to attack the rook. Now, if the rook comes back to h4, then knight f3 check wins the rook with a fork. So rook h5 and king g6. And at this point, Towns looks up at Beth and says, "Jesus Christ, Harmon, you're humiliating my rook." And Beth sort of looks up and with those big eyes says, "You won't have to suffer much longer." With a smile. There's obviously a bit of a connection between them. And Towns plays the rook over to a5. Well, wherever that rook goes, whether it's e5 or c5, or indeed here, there's going to be a knight fork, and knight b3 check wins the rook with a fork. And Towns says, "Damn," and holds his hands out and resigns the game. But, you know, this position is just a bit too neat. And, you know, I thought I'd seen this one before, and a little bit of research dug up this study. Composed by Henri Rinck, or Henry Rinck. He was a study composer. He lived from 1870 to 1952. Prolific endgame study composer. So it's not a real game. And you can see it's exactly the same position, but with colours reversed. And I think it's actually really nice that Pandolfini and Kasparov gave a little nod to Henry Rinck, because he was an absolutely brilliant composer, beautiful positions. And, well, it's exactly the same. You can see white wins with king g2 and king g3, and the rook, wherever the rook goes, all these squares are mined, basically. There's going to be a knight fork wherever that rook moves, as in the game in the film. But yeah, a nice nod to Henry Rinck. Do check out his studies. They are absolutely beautiful. So then in the same tournament, we had a game that was, well, this was Beth Harmon playing with white against Harry Beltic, who I think was the Kentucky state champion. And Beltic is played by Harry Melling, who some of you might know as the actor that played Dudley Dursley in the Harry Potter films. He looks a bit different now, I tell you. Incredible. He's lost that puppy fat. It was quite a long time ago. Anyway, this game, which was well, okay, I won't spoil the plot, but it was a significant game. Reached this position. I won't go through the whole thing, but this was actually a game played between Rashid Nezhmetdinov and Genrikh Kasparian, two legendary figures actually. Kasparian was a study composer himself, a renowned composer, and Rashid Nezhmetdinov, well, a legendary player in the Soviet Union. This game was played in 1955 in Riga in the Soviet Union, well, Latvia, but then part of the Soviet Union. Nezhmetdinov had an incredible reputation as such a dangerous attacking player. Absolutely scored brilliant wins with sacrificial play. Had a plus score against Tal, for example. There were some wonderful games against Tal, but against others as well. He wasn't such a good defender. Other Soviet players who were kind of more solid had a very good score against him, but his brilliances were absolutely brilliant. And this is a really fine game. Well, in this position, you can see it's actually very difficult to see who is attacking who. I mean, this rook is looking towards the king. Black's, well, all Black's major pieces look good here. And in fact, rook d3 is not a bad move. But Kasparian played knight g6. And here Nezhmetdinov played rook f7 check. Now you can see that that queen looks through to the knight. So if the king steps back, then queen takes knight is winning. And if that rook is taken, then, well, in fact, white is going to crash through with the queen. So king h6 played. And now here's the brilliant move. Nezhmetdinov played queen takes knight on g6 check. And here Kasparian resigned, because if king takes queen, well, white can force a checkmate. It's very attractive. Basically, the king gets forced back. This is the longest route to mate, basically. This is black's best defense. And here you can see that the rook checks the king. The moment that rook is pinning the bishop to the king, but now the king has to step to the rook's file, and bishop f5 is checkmate. That's a beautiful checkmate. And again, I really like it that Pandolfini and Kasparov, I don't know which of them approved this game or suggested this game, but you know, they're both in it together. You know, a nice nod to Nezhmetdinov, because he was a legendary player. Now, so far, you will have noticed that all the games that we've looked at have all been played by men in real life. And I think this is one of my qualms. The producers did a brilliant job. Pandolfini and Kasparov did a brilliant job. However, I think they missed a trick. I think they scored a bit of an own goal. Why didn't they use games by famous chess players? Why didn't they have games by Judith Polgar? Hou Yifan, who's currently the strongest woman in the world. Or we could go back further in chess history. Maya Chibudnitsa, Nona Gaprindashvili, Vera Menchik, the first women's world champion. Well, here's just a little suggestion. They could have had this game. So this game was played by Hou Yifan, currently the strongest woman in the world. This was played in the World Under-20 Championship. And here Yifan played queen takes bishop. There are a few little similarities with the Nezhmetdinov game. Pawn takes. Rook takes rook check. You can notice it's the same piece configuration. 2 rooks and a bishop. Now, I'll just stop for a moment. What's the quickest way for white to win this position? You can actually win with checks. It's a bit tricky. But there's a really neat finish here for white. Can you spot it? This is beautiful. It's really subtle. Rook to f6. Now that threatens h6 checkmate. The queen and the rook cannot do anything. There's no attack against the king. So to defend against h6, well, here actually black resigned, but if you play h6 to block white's pawn, then that takes away the square from the king. And now rook check is actually mate, because the king's escape square has been taken by the pawn. Now that's a really subtle finish. Could have used that. I mean, that's just one example. But it just struck me that, you know, there's a certain similarity. But I repeat, I don't want to be too harsh on Kasparov and Pandolfini, because I think they did a really good job of setting up some really nice positions. And it's not just in the chess games where they've gone into real detail. And here's just one example I picked up. There's a scene where Beth Harmon goes into the school library and asks the librarian, do you have any chess books? And the librarian says, well, we've got a book on Capablanca. And this is produced. This book. Now, I don't know if you can see that clearly. I've taken some photos of this. You can see there the gold embossed signature of J.R. Capablanca, Jose Raul Capablanca. Now, this book, this is the first edition of Capablanca's book, My Chess Career. It's a little bit battered, but it's a beautiful book. You can see here, it was first published in 1920. This is the first edition. And you can see, look at the design. You can just see there the little curves at the edge there, quite sort of 1920s-ish, actually. So I've taken a few photos. You can just see inside. A really nice photo of Capablanca. It's really nicely typeset. The quality of the paper is really nice, even though, you know, it's 100 years old. In fact, because it's the centenary of its publication, I was actually intending to look at some of the games in the book. I wanted to feature it, but haven't had time yet. I will hopefully get around to that before the year is out. But that shows the level of detail that they'd actually produced the first edition of Capablanca's book and used it in the film. And I think I've got that correctly. The book kind of flashed across the screen very quickly, but it looks like the first edition to me. It looks like this book. It's very distinctive, but I'm sure some of you will tell me if I've got that wrong. But anyway, I think that's correct. So listen, I want to look at some more games from the series. And, well, they're coming up soon. But I think they have produced some really, really interesting games, and they've recreated the games very well. Of course, sometimes they've taken a few shortcuts in filming. I mean, normally you wouldn't get chess players talking to each other over the board, for example. But I understand sometimes for the drama of recreating or filming a chess game for non-chess players, you have to do that kind of thing. So I forgive them for that. But anyway, it's very well done. More coming soon. Thanks for watching.